The second question is, how do you feel that heroin has affected you?
You know, I work in healthcare, and so every day now I see overdoses and victims of heroin abuse and how that affects not only them but their families.
It breaks my heart because I see a community that's in pain, that's suffering.
When my two twins were born, they were in the NICU at a hospital in Lexington. And by sitting in that NICU in an open room, I also seen children who were born addicted to these drugs and heroin, and watching them shake and watching them be affected, being born into this world addicted. And by watching people have to come in and hug them and hold them.
I see it in my community a lot. Like, you see news stories about it, and it's really sad the toll that it's taken on this community.
Think about how many people are involved or how many people are affected. It's not just the addict's life. It's the entire circle of people around that person.
I'm a mom, and heroin stole my dreams, my hopes, my child.
I'm a mom and a police officer, and heroin has affected me in both areas, through family members, through the community, and through our interaction with the public.
I think it goes back to, in the past, there was still that stigma there. There has been a stigma early into this epidemic that we're currently in, but I see that is coming away from this epidemic because there are so many people that are affected by it. You may not be directly affected by it, but if you're not, you have a friend who has a child who is struggling with it, and I've seen it affect so many different socioeconomic dynamics that you can't really brush it under the rug anymore. When you're having 170-something people in one county, in one state, dying from it, and that's happening in multiple states and multiple counties across the country, it's kind of hard to sweep that under the rug. That would be like sweeping an outbreak of malaria or whatever under the rug. You can't do that. It comes to a point where when an epidemic's taking out a whole generation of people, you can't brush that under the rug. You have to address it as, a country, a city, a state, whatever. You have to address that. And I don't think that was the case when heroin was so prevalent in, the 70s, early 80s. I don't think that was the case then. There was more criminalistic attitudes towards that. Now, even in the jails and the judicial system, we have drug courts in place who want to see those that are struggling with that addiction recover and succeed, and be productive members of society, to be those people that can go on and get a college degree and help serve the communities that their addiction is affecting.
Yeah, and if you could speak to that as well,
Right.
The current epidemic in perspective of the past.
Right. Of course, like she said, in the 70s, the heroin was there, the drugs were there, but here recently, you hear in the news of all the overdoses in Madison County since 2016. Now, we're 3 months shy from the year ending, but in Madison County, there was over 220 overdoses of heroin, and then you're talking 30 deaths since the beginning of the year. Now, last year there were 25 deaths. So we're now seeing an increase, and like I said, this year has not even ended. And they have given, EMS has given 348 doses of Narcan to overdose victims of heroin. And so you see all that going on, and then when you get into the courtrooms, like she talked about drug courts. There's drug courts for adults that have these addictions, and that they are sending them to rehab in lieu of going to jail, or they're sending them to narcotics, addiction classes instead of going to jail, Or the sad part about it is that we also have a juvenile drug court. You know, so when you see that and it's affecting our juveniles, and juveniles are addicts from 9, 10, 11 years old, and some of these infants are being born addicts, you know, you see that it's worse. And then now with the addition of adding the fentanyl to the heroin, you know, and the heroin itself is deadly. But then when you, mix it with fentanyl, and fentanyl is 50 times stronger than the heroin, and then now we're seeing increases in the carfentanil, which is an animal tranquilizer that's added to this drug. And that's 100 times stronger than the fentanyl. And then when you have officers that are being responsible for carrying Narcan to administer to addicts that are overdosing on it, and then we're seeing that it's being sold over the counter. You know, never has anything like this has ever been sold over the counter back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. We now have Narcan, which is, basically, diminishes the effects of the heroin. And we have children that are being taught, they're teaching their own children as young as 9 years old to administer Narcan. The parents are. And so this is something that we're trying to address it on every level that we can. But then once we address it, then a new problem pops up. So we're trying to get ahead of it, but then it seems like we go 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, because, it's the increase in the high and what they want, and then the quantity and the quality of the drug that's out there, and also the people that it's reaching. It's no longer an adult problem. It's a juvenile problem, too.
And you made a good point about that. Now the schools are even keeping Narcan in the schools because of the likelihood that someone is going to come into school and overdose in our school systems.
And officers, we are equipped even now at our department back in our evidence room, so that whenever the officers are handling this drug, to package it as evidence to be sent off to the lab. If we come in contact with this carfentanil, it absorbs through the skin, then we could die instantly. And so we don't know what this is laced with. And so, we have Narcan in our evidence room, so if an officer does, get this accidental exposure to it, then we have the measures there to protect them also.
I think that was one of the things that, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, they had a DEA agent come from Washington to our HEAT group, which is a heroin education action team that the U.S. Attorney's Office put together to go out into the communities and to speak and educate. But they had officers that were on site, and they had put evidence into a bag and burped it, and just the ingestion of the air from the bag, they overdosed on site.
Yes.
And I think as a parent, that was something I never knew when my son was using, until the DEA agent started investigating his death. He said, if you find anything, because my son had several boxes of syringes he had gone and purchased at Walmart at the pharmacy. He said, I feel like there's, he's probably got a quantity of drugs somewhere in his personal belongings. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Just call us. Because of that particular fact, they didn't want me to overdose.
Right.
Finding that stuff and handling it. And as a parent, that was very eye-opening for me. I had no idea that, we living around those that are in addiction run the risk of overdosing unintentionally just from handling the drug itself.